The Panhard AML 245 is a fast, long-ranged, and relatively cheap first-generation armored car with excellent reconnaissance capability. Designed on a small, lightly armored 4x4 chassis, it weighs an estimated 5.5 tons, much lighter than a tank, and is therefore more rapidly employable. Since 1959, AMLs have been marketed on up to 5 continents. Several variants remained in continuous production for half a century. These have been operated by 54 national governments and other entities worldwide, seeing regular combat. The AML 245 was once regarded as one of the most heavily armed scout vehicles in service, fitted with a low-velocity DEFAD 921 90mm smoothbore cannon firing conventional high-explosive and high-explosive anti-tank shells, or a Brandt LR 60mm breech-loading mortar with 53 rounds and dual 7.5mm MASAA 52 Nanofords-1 machine guns with 3,800 rounds, all mounted coaxially in the turret. An AML is capable of destroying targets at 1,500 meters with its D921 main gun. In this configuration it is considered a match for second line in older main battle tanks. AMLs have appeared most prominently in Angola, Iraq, and the Falkland Islands, where they were pitted against British FV-101 Scorpions by Argentine forces, as well as in the Lebanese Civil War between 1975 and 1990. History: during World War II, the French Army and their Free French successors used a wide variety of vehicles for reconnaissance duties, ranging from the compact Lafley S-15 to the Panhard 178, which could mount the same 75mm armament as contemporary heavy tanks, and multi-wheel designs such as the Type 201. After the war it became less desirable to maintain this plethora of armored cars. In July 1945 Paris issued a requirement for a postwar design combining those features of previous assets, especially the Type 201, that had shown potential both during and prior to the Battle of France. This led to the 8x8 Panhard EBO which entered service in 1950. Similarly, in 1956 the French Ministry of Defense was persuaded to commission a replacement for the Daimler Ferret Scout car. Also manufactured by Panhard, the successor was the AML which entered service in 1961. As with much post-war hardware based on the experience of subsequent colonial theaters, the AML was recognized for its outstanding ruggedness, dependability, firepower-to-weight ratio, and adaptability to the numerous minor conflicts waged since 1945. This reputation has led to amazing export success in over 40 countries, Africa being one of its biggest markets. Development. The Panhard AML was birthed as a private venture by the Socia Copyright Copyright de Constructions Panhard A. Levasseur, a military subsidiary of PSA Peugeot Citroën. It was derived in part from the Daimler Ferret, offering important similarities in external design. The first prototype appeared in 1959 and the vehicle was put into production in 1960, with more than 4,000 examples constructed by the time production ended. In the late 1950s, the French Army successfully operated a number of Ferret Scout cars in Algeria. Impressive as they were from a conventional standpoint, the rest of France's existing light armour such as the Panhard EBO and M8 Greyhound were not suitably equipped for counter-insurgency. Battles of the Algerian War often involved short, sharp, skirmishes which required indirect fire support such as mortars rather than solid shot and shell. In addition, the North African conditions demanded a lighter, less sophisticated, vehicle which would be simpler to maintain and operate. As an interim measure France had purchased 200 Ferrets from the United Kingdom. These were light enough but carried only a single general-purpose machine gun, which was inadequate for offensive purposes. Nevertheless, they were sufficiently successful that there was a possibility of producing the Ferret under license in France. However, Saviem, Belliot, and Panhard petitioned for bidding on a homegrown vehicle, and in 1956 the Ministère de l'Art Copyright Fence issued specifications for an indigenous wheeled armored car of similar dimensions and layout to the Ferret but mounting a breech-loading mortar. By 1959, this had emerged as the Auto Mitrailleuse La Copyright Gare, designated Model 245B by Panhard. Early prototypes were completed in mid-1959 and by the end of 1961 at least one regiment in Algeria was receiving them. The AML was equipped with a 60mm Brandt gun mortar and two medium MASAA 52 Nanofords-1 machine guns. The AML was immediately successful, but as the Algerian conflict diminished so did the need for a light mortar carrier deployed in anti-guerrilla operations. A more primary concern was the conventional threat posed by Soviet airborne fighting vehicles in the event of a Warsaw Pact invasion. Meanwhile, South Africa, an AML customer which had considered adopting the British Alva Saladin, also charged Panhard technicians to look into the development of an AML variant with equal or superior fire support capability. This and the adoption of a highly effective 90mm smoothbore cannon led to all new AML 245CS being refitted with the H90 turret sporting the new gun. It fired fin-stabilized, shaped charge projectiles boasting a muzzle velocity of 760 meters per second and more than capable of penetrating 320 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. In consequence, the later AMLs could even engage main battle tanks. In addition to its heat shells, the H90 also carries fin-stabilized high-explosive projectiles, the total number of rounds stored being 20, compared with the 56 of the original 60mm mortar version. To provide a complete family of wheeled armored cars, Panhard used AML components to engineer a small personal carrier, the VAR Copyright Transport de Troupes, better known as the Panhard M3. The M3 consisted of a boxy, all-welded, hull with an engine relocated behind the driver in order to provide a large troop compartment at its rear. Its wheelbase was also increased from the AML's 2.5 m to a higher 2.7 m and the track from 1.62 to 2.5 m. In spite of this, maintenance alongside the AML fleet is rather simplified, given that both vehicles share a 95% interchangeability in automotive parts. Specifications fitted with coil spring suspension and drum brakes, the AML lacks hydraulic assist on either brakes or steering. Only front wheels steer. Consequently, the steering wheel requires considerable strength to turn while the vehicle is in motion. While stationary it remains effectively locked. Rear-wheel drive is transmitted directly to epicyclic hub reduction gears, also known as bevel boxes. The motor and gearbox have been harnessed via a centrifugal clutch with electromagnetic control, eliminating the need for a clutch pedal. This type of clutch is automatically engaged by gripping the knob of the gear shift lever, which is located behind the driver's seat in the turret floor. An AML's crankshaft is carried in 3 ball bearings to reduce motor friction. Powerplant design was inspired by the Panhard EBR and incorporates an air-cooled, 156-liter, 4-cylinder engine developing 67 kilowatts. AMLs may also be fitted with a variety of liquid-cooled engines. Although as demonstrated by its Eland Mk7 counterpart, this requires a costly rebuild of the rear hull to accommodate the new cooling apparatus. AML hulls are assembled from only 13 welded pieces, with a driver seated at the front of the hull and the turret to his immediate rear. Above both doors the hull widens into a circular flange onto which the turret is bolted. This makes the turret basket extremely cramped, and little space is available above an AML-90's turret ring due to the massive gun breech and somewhat haphazard ammunition stowage. There are optical ring sights in front of both turret seats for quick laying of the main armament. The AML uses nitrogen inner tubes adopted from the EBR, providing run-flat capability on 41 cm diameter wheels. Its 280mm wide Michelin tires can be deflated to reduce ground pressure to as low as 70 to 110 kPa. These have been replaced in some Anglophone armies by the Dunlop track grips also favoured in Bedford and Elvis military vehicles. Service history French military doctrine recognized 2 separate fields of armored vehicle deployment, the first consisting of primary tasks such as maneuver and combat, while the second included other tasks such as rearguard defense, liaison, and deception. The latter was to be the responsibility of a mobile reserve which provided interior security during wartime, designated Dar copyright Fensopa copyright Rational du Territoire armored cavalry regiments. Initially equipped with AMLs and jeeps modified for scouting purposes, these units worked closely with the French police and national gendarmerie. Their goal was to intercept hostile special forces or airborne units which specialized in deep penetration behind the front line. Secondary tasks included counterinsurgency, passive observation, and guarding static installations. Each DOT troop came to include 3 AML platoons. As they were expected to remain faithful to the traditional mission of reconnaissance where observation had priority over combat, a number of the Panhard seemed to have been stripped of their main armament, necessitating crew dependence on the vehicle's secondary automatic weapons. Nevertheless, as French reconnaissance theory also suggested the occasional need to engage hostile armor and force it to deploy, AML-90s were favored as well. DOT regiments came to hold a generic pool of 16 AML-90s and 34 other AMLs of varying configuration. As the AML was readily air transportable, it came to form the materiel strong point of the French Foreign Legion's rapid deployment force. The Legion AML saw combat overseas either as part of single deployments by the 1st Foreign Cavalry Regiment or to provide fire support for other Legion regiments. Crews perfected unique airfield assaults in which AML-90s were unloaded directly from Transall C-160s onto the objective, with infantry joining them by parachute. These vehicles first saw combat against BTR-152s manned by Frelinat rebels in Chad during OPA copyright ration accord. In the subsequent months, additional AML-90s rushed in by the RA copyright Giant Infantry Charles de Marine repelled a major offensive by the Chadian Democratic Revolutionary Council, which was backed by 50 Libyan T-55 tanks and EE-9 Cascavel armored cars. The mobile gendarmerie operated over 100 AML-60s and AML-90s, which were allocated to 19 separate squadrons. In subsequent decades, a number may have been replaced by the much heavier Renault VBC-90. France is still believed to possess 300 AMLs in storage. Middle East Israel, an order of 29 AML-90s placed by the Israel Defense Forces in 1960 marked the first sale of AMLs to a foreign power, ushered in a new era of French arms sales to Tel Aviv, and helped cement Panhard's success on the export market. The IDF armored cars had been received by the end of 1963 and were first displayed publicly on the eve of Yom Ha'atzmaut, 1966. Israeli units were primarily impressed by their high mobility and ergonomic nature, which was deemed ideal for airborne operations. Nevertheless, the AML-90's envisaged deployment by the new copyright Rospartiel SA-321 Superflins also purchased from France did not materialize, as the helicopters could not handle its 5,500 kilograms combat weight. At least 9 AML-90s were in service with the 41st Reconnaissance Company of the Harold Brigade during the Six-Day War under a Major Amnon Ishkol, participating in the capture of Ramallah in June 1967. The AMLs were initially posted at Mevazaret Zion following the fall of East Jerusalem. They were among the first IDF armor to cross into the West Bank during the conflict, probing the Jordanian resistance. Major roads had been blocked by tank barriers, although these could be easily bypassed in nimble armored cars. The much more cumbersome Super Sherman and Centurion tanks tasked with leading the IDF spearhead towards Tel El-Ful failed to reach their objective. Most were forced to turn back in the face of difficult terrain. Joined by the surviving 7 Shermans and 8 M3 half-tracks, Major Ishkol's AML-90s later helped defeat a Jordanian counterattack with M48 patterns. In the war of attrition, Israeli AMLs faced Jordanian M48s again on the Damaya Bridge during the Battle of Karami. Originally tasked with screening the IDF Shermans as they crossed the bridge, the lightly armored AML-90 was at a unique disadvantage when confronted by entrenched patterns. Moreover, the Jordan River was in flood and vehicle crews were unable to exploit their maneuverability in the muddy farmland. Several AMLs were knocked out by tank fire or towed anti-tank guns. They were withdrawn from service not long afterwards. The Arab-Euro-Israeli conflict marked some of the highest armor-to-armor kill ratios achieved with the AML platform to date, including the destruction of at least 13 Egyptian and Jordanian tanks. Especially notable were several T-54 kills credited to an AML-90 platoon in the Sinai Peninsula. As late as the 1980s, military scholars continued to maintain that the 90mm DEFA cannon lacked the muzzle velocity to penetrate the thick steel hull of a T-54 55. More well-documented cases have since verified this was possible, though only with multiple shots or a direct hit on the turret rim near the driver's hatch. Israeli AML crews also sustained losses of their own during this engagement, and some AML-90s may have been captured intact by the Egyptian defenders. Saudi Arabia. In 1964, the Royal Saudi Army issued a requirement for an armored car proven in desert warfare and equipped with a large semi-automatic cannon. Bids were accepted from three companies: Euro Alvis, Cadillac Gage, and Panhard Euro, which offered the Saladin, V100 Commando, and AML, respectively, but the debate over which of the three to adopt was hamstrung by political considerations early on. Saudi Arabia remained inhibited from seeking American assistance in devising suitable defense programs by the criticism and hostility of other Arab states. Under these circumstances, only arms transactions with French or British firms could be entertained. Despite long-standing diplomatic contacts, the French presence in Riyadh was rather limited compared to that of the United Kingdom, and the latter was in a better position to provide long-term logistical support for armored cars to the Saudi military. Alvis was initially awarded a contract for 83 Saladins with a 10-year option on spare parts. Final negotiations for the delivery of the Saladins were underway when Sultan bin Abdulaziz abruptly cancelled the purchase in favor of Panhard. The $95 million Panhard deal proved instrumental in breaking existing preconceptions that the Arabian arms market was well protected by the UK. Gaullist circles heralded it as a major business and political success. In an interview in Beirut, Sultan bin Abdulaziz merely asserted that AMLs were selected as part of King Faisal's policy to strengthen the army with a greater infusion of modern arms. Saudi Army officials have preferred the heavier Saladin and appreciated its worthiness in desert conditions, but conceded the AML-90 was much cheaper. Panhard undertook the order amid much protest by pro-Israel lobbyists in France, who urged restraint in shipping arms to Arab bloc states likely to use them against Tel Aviv. The sale was also challenged as a violation of Charles de Gaulle's Middle Eastern embargo, although the French government insisted it did not classify armored scout cars as the same heavy war materiel covered by sanctions. Saudi AML-90s of the 20th Armored Brigade were blooded near Daraa during the Yom Kippur War, having been airlifted to assist its Syrian defenders in Lockheed C-130 Hercules aircraft loaned from Iran. The airlift was carried out on October 14, 1973. 6 Iranian C-130s were needed to convey the vehicles and about 2,000 motorized infantrymen from Saudi Arabia to Syria. AML crews were generally assigned to static guard duty, patrolling the Damascus-Daraa road and keeping lines of communications clear between the multinational Arab forces. At least one AML-90 was captured by the Golani Brigade, likely while attempting to reconnoiter an IDF position after dark. The Saudi contingent later participated in the fighting at Tel Mascara alongside the Jordanian 40th Armored Brigade. They were halted by accurate tank fire from the IDF's 17th Reserve Armor Brigade and later forced to retreat. 4 AML-90s were destroyed, presumably during this action, although the Saudis claim to have also knocked out 5 Israeli tanks and damaged 5 more. Saudi Arabia ordered between 200 and 220 AMLs from France in 1968, with deliveries completed by 1970. Some sources have claimed a second order was placed in 1978 for another 250. The Saudi Army has since retired much of its Panhard fleet and exported surplus stocks to various nations. During the Gulf War, an estimated 200 AML-90s were phased from service. Upon learning that the Senegalese units participating in Operation Desert Shield were also familiar with the Panhard type, General Khalid bin Sultan ordered a number retained for their use. The armored cars were hurriedly serviced, then donated to Senegal. Large quantities were also accepted by Morocco and Niger. Lebanon. At least 74 AML-90s were delivered to the Lebanese armed forces between 1970 and 1975, and saw considerable action in the Lebanese Civil War. As their crews often left them unguarded outside army compounds, several may have been stolen by LAF deserters on their way to join regional militias. Others vanished during the disintegration of individual battalions, and by 1981 Lebanon's fleet had dwindled to 52. The surviving AML squadrons remain plagued by chronic shortages of personnel. Some crews even fought in their turrets without a trained commander and depended on inexperienced spotters outside the vehicles to guide their fire. This resulted in phenomenal inaccuracy. Following the Battle of the Hotels, Lebanese front troops in the port district of Beirut brought their Panads into action for the first time in the Civil War, engaging charioteer tank destroyers crewed by AML and Lebanese Arab Army militants. Having lost nearly all their heavy armor and tanks to the militias, the predominantly Christian remnants of the Lebanese army appropriated 3 AML-90s and 9 obsolete T-17 Staghounds to stave off repeated assaults by LAA forces from the Hotel district. Due to the armored cars' heightened vulnerability to RPG-7s, their crews began using debris as makeshift barricades. Muslim fighters failed in attempting to destroy the AMLs with RPGs, as well as B-10 and M40 recoilless rifles, since the projectiles lacked a clear trajectory in the rubble. The AML-90's immense firepower at close quarters soon resulted in great structural damage to portside Beirut. A number of fortified buildings were wrecked by 90mm HE shells, and those struck by multiple heat volleys demolished on their foundations. With truck-mounted Zu-23-2s covering their advance, the AMLs advanced on Allenby Street, flattening all resistance, and took the waterfront. Although both the LAA and the leftist Lebanese National Movement hastily brought up charioteers and M41 Walker Bulldog tanks, so much wreckage was blocking the streets they could not maneuver. It was impossible to shoot accurately through the debris, and tanks could only manage speculative fire to discourage the AMLs. In 1983, LAF tanks with AML-90s in support were sent to eliminate Tamil militants then threatening elements of multinational force in Lebanon at the Lebanese University. Following the siege of Beirut, the LAF again mobilized its AMLs to occupy positions vacated by withdrawing Israeli troops. Militia use Panad AMLs were favored by the Lebanese militias due to their flexibility, especially in urban combat situations which saw them deployed against heavier Syrian armor. A detailed analysis undertaken by the United States Army Research Laboratory in 1979 found the AML operated effectively in Beirut, and noted that the ease with which the Panad is driven and repaired, and the absence of tracks, provide the mobility desirable in an urban environment. Modifications to militia AMLs included replacement of the original Michelin tires with an air-pocketed type more resistant to mortar shrapnel, as well as increased armor plate. Euro-fabricated after the appearance of Syrian tanks made it difficult ordering volunteers to man the lightly protected vehicles. Christian Falangist militiamen deployed 12 AML-90s as assault guns during the Tel al-Za'atar massacre, using their elevated 90mm cannon to knock out second- or third-story fortifications shielding Palestinian guerrillas. AML-90s of the Progressive Socialist Party also swung into action against 5 Staghounds of the Lebanese Internal Security Forces during a raid on Faridia barracks in mid-1976. The armored cars were incompetently handled by the leftist forces, and later abandoned near Kahil with an AMX-13 due to mechanical problems. UNIFIL In 1980, AMLs of the Irish Army were deployed with the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, where they saw considerable action against militants at Atayri and South Lebanon. Each Union Service battalion included a troop of AML-90s, ostensibly for passive reconnaissance, which functioned as a support company. As the most heavily armed of the national contingents, the Irish Squadron also became a mobile force reserve. 2 Lebanese half-tracks used to harass UNIFIL convoys were destroyed by an AML-90, several others being abandoned by their crews after taking warning fire from the AML's coaxial machine guns. The armored cars also held a tense standoff with militia Super Shermans around Atiri, although the latter declined to intervene in the fighting and were ultimately not engaged by peacekeeping forces. 2 AML crew members received one of Ireland's highest military honours, the Military Medal for Gallantry, for their actions at Atiri. Iraq, AML-90s were deployed, somewhat ineffectually, by Iraqi reconnaissance units against USMC and Saudi National Guard forces during the Battle of Khafji. South America in the Falklands War, the Argentines deployed 12 AML-90s from Escuadrón de Exploración Caballería Blindada 181 and an unknown additional number from Escuadrón de Exploración Caballería Blindada 10 near Port Stanley. During the Battle of Wireless Ridge, the only armor versus armor engagement of the war was fought when these units encountered FV-101 Scorpions and FV-107 Scimitars of the Blues and Royals. The armored cars were abandoned in Stanley after the conflict ended. At least one AML-90 was destroyed by FMLN insurgents with rifle grenades and an M67 recoilless rifle in the Salvadoran Civil War. African During the Portuguese colonial war, the Portuguese army operated AML-60s in Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau. Approximately 50 were ordered in 1965 to replace the heavier Panhard EBR. Severe maintenance problems were encountered in the corrosive African environment, and custom air intakes cannibalized from utility vehicles had to be installed accordingly. Local engineers also copied several modifications applied to the Eland Mk7 for improved performance in this theater. In Portuguese service, the AML-60 equipped reconnaissance platoons, mainly used in convoy escort. In 1987, during the Toyota War, FANT's use of swift-wheeled vehicles, including AML-90s, allowed Chadian forces to break through combined arms formations and cause severe damage before the slower Libyan tanks could track or engage their targets. The Panhards, deployed in concert with Milan missile teams at strategic hill junctures, frequently ambushed T-55s at a range of under 300 meters. In mid-December 2010, AMLs manned by Laurent Gbagbo's supporters were used to intimidate Ivorian civilians in Abidjan and the western countryside. The École de Formation et d'Application des Troupes Blindes, at Mbanza-Nungu in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, was originally established by French military cooperation mission to instruct African AML crews. Today, the academy can host 70 trainees. 10 African armies are currently participating in the program. Variants. All the versions have a common configuration, the driver is seated in front with a two-seater turret on top. There is a door on each side and the power unit in the back. AML-60, known simply as the AML-HE-60-7, this was Panhard's initial production model and included a rounded turret with twin 7.62mm machine guns on the left and a breech-loaded 60mm Hotchkiss brand CM60A1 mortar on the right, with 3,800 rounds of 7.62mm and 53 mortar projectiles, respectively. The mortar can still be muzzle-loaded from outside the vehicle in conventional manner, but is unique in its opening breech locked by a falling block much like direct-fire artillery. The AML-60's reload time can be slow for inexperienced vehicle crews, as multiple ranging and ordnance calculations must be made by the commander to ascertain firing angles. In several armies it has been replaced or complemented by the AML-HE-60-20. A variant which replaces both 7.62mm machine guns with a 20mm autocannon and 500 stored rounds. An upgraded model, the AML-HE-60-20 Serval, is also available. The AML-HE-60-12 replaces the twin general-purpose machine guns with a single 12.7mm heavy machine gun. AML-90, known simply as the AML-H-90. The vehicle was engineered for fire support and aggressive reconnaissance. Its turret includes a single 7.62mm machine gun on the left and a low-velocity 90mm DEFA-D921 cannon on the right, with 2,400 rounds of 7.62mm and 20 high-explosive or high-explosive anti-tank shells, respectively. The turret is manually powered, The main gun lacks stabilization in elevation and azimuth, and there is an optical fire control system. With upgrades, it fires a complete range of 90mm cartridges in shell and projectile form, from atypical discarding SABOT kinetic energy rounds to canister and a variety of smoke rounds. Armored targets can be successfully engaged at up to 2,000 meters. There is a large double baffle muzzle brake which reduces the recoil force exerted by the gun on the small panhard chassis. An upgraded model, the AML-90 Lynx, incorporates night vision features, a laser rangefinder, and superior turret controls. AMLS-530, designed as a self-propelled anti-aircraft weapon, the AMLS-530 was developed solely for export and is operated by the Venezuelan Army. It carries two 20mm autocannon, with 600 stored rounds. Eland 60, South African production model of the AML-60 HE-60-7. Eland 90, South African production model of the AML-H-90. Operators, this section is about operators of the Panhard AML. For operators of the South African variant, see Eland Mk7. Current operators Algeria, 54 AML-60, Argentina, 50 AML-90, Bahrain, 23 AML-90, Bosnia and Herzegovina, 10 AML-90, Burkina Faso, 15, Burma, 50 AML-90, Burundi, 30, Cameroon, 31. Ex-Bosnian Army, Chad, 85. Likely replaced by the Eland, Kati-Idva, 20, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Dominican Republic, 20 AML-90, Djibouti, 24. 20 operational. Gabon, 18, Ecuador, 27, Egypt, El Salvador, 12 AML-90, France, over 300 in reserve, Iraq, 170 delivered between 1967 and 1976. 10 operational. Kenya, 82. Refurbished by an Israeli firm in 2007. Lebanon, 74, Lesotho, 6 AML-90. 4 operational. Mauritania, 60, 39 AML-90 and 20 AML-60, Morocco, 210, Niger, 36, Nigeria, 137, Pakistan, AML-60, Rwanda, 15, Sahrawi Republic, Saudi Arabia, 300, 190 AML-90 and 110 AML-60. 235 operational. Senegal, 54, Somalia, 15 AML-90, Somaliland, Sudan, 6 AML-90. 5 operational. Togo, 10, Tunisia, 18, United Arab Emirates, 90 AML-90, Venezuela, 10, Yemen, 185. Former operators Amal Party, inherited from the Lebanese Armed Forces. Angola, likely captured from Portugal. Cambodia, 15 AML-60s in service between 1965 and 1975. FNLA, 1 AML-90. Now on display at the Mr. Das Fora section as Armadas, Luanda. Ethiopia 56 AML-60, FNLC, 1 AML-60, some AML-90s, Ireland, 18 AML-20, 15 AML-90, Israel, 29 AML-90, Lebanese forces, 12 AML-90 inherited from the LAF. Libya, 20 AML-90, Malaysia, 140 AML-60 and AML-90s, Portugal, 56 AML-60, some AML-90s, South Africa, 100 AMLs procured in 1962, swiftly replaced by Eland Mk2. Spain, 140 AML-60 and AML-90s, UNITA, 4 AMLs acquired clandestinely through Zaire. Saw service during the Angolan Civil War. In popular culture, the Panhard AML has made some major film appearances, most notably in The Living Daylights, when 2 Moroccan Army AML-90s were mocked up as Soviet reconnaissance vehicles pursuing Afghan Mujahideen. These examples included mounted RPK machine guns and communications not dissimilar to those in the BRDM-2. AMLs were first portrayed in the 1973 French thriller The Day of the Jackal, and 1974 Italian war film While There's War There's Hope, which featured an AML-90 of the Portuguese armed forces during the Guinea-Bissau War of Independence. Two AML-90s erroneously presented as German scout cars serving with the Afrika Korps appear in the 1984 French war film Les Morfleurs. Gallery. See also. Panhard series Eland Mk7, Panhard EBR, Panhard M3, Panhard ERC90 Sergei, Panhard VCR, Panhard VBL. Vehicles of comparable role, performance, and era Alva Saladin, BRDM2, EE9 Cascavel, Ferret, Fox, VBC90. Notes and references. Annotations References Further reading, Christopher F. Voss, Jane's Tank and Combat Vehicle Recognition Guide, HarperCollins Publishers, London 2002. ISBN 0-00-712759-6, Peter Gerard Locke and Peter David Farquharson Cook, Fighting Vehicles and Weapons of Rhodesia 1965-80, P&P Publishing, Wellington 1995 ISSN 0-473-02413-6, Stephen J. Zaliger, Tank Battles of the Mid-East Wars, The Wars of 1973 to the Present, Concord Publications, Hong Kong 2003. ISBN 962-361-613-9. External links, Panhard's AML page, footage of Irish AML-90s firing, Charles Frenner Section A's, AML-60, AML-90.